This is an absolute nightmare for the government, isn't it? I mean, it's really difficult to work out where they go from here because, yes, they've inherited this problem from the former government, but they haven't made it any better. And now, if we're going to start seeing these kind of flashpoints that we saw at Epping, at various hotels across the country, it's not a good look.
No, it's a real mess, isn't it? And I think it's important in this debate just to sort of step back a little bit and try our best to take a bit of the heat out of it, because there's all kinds of things going on. So first of all, I think you have to recognise that there are parts of the world which are war-torn, where people are persecuted. For example, there's a country called Sudan, which is in a dreadful, dreadful civil war, where there is famine, where there is genocide taking place. It doesn't get as much coverage, actually, in the media as, you know, what happens in Gaza. And it's right that Gaza gets covered, by the way. I'm not saying it shouldn't be covered. It doesn't get as much coverage, but it's understandable that people want to flee Sudan. It's understandable that people who are persecuted by the Taliban in Afghanistan want to flee. And we've always been a haven for people fleeing from genocide, from persecution, who are fleeing to save their lives and their families' lives. But equally, where the system is being abused, and we do know that there is also abuse in the system, that gangs smuggle people across Europe and try to bring them to the UK, that the government has to get better and swifter at returning people who don't have the right to be here. At the moment, you've got a system where people are basically sort of left in limbo, waiting for months, sometimes years, for their asylum application to be processed. And where do those people go? The previous government put them in these hotels. It's ironic that you've got Tory politicians now saying, let's support all these councils taking it to court. It's actually the Tories who put them in these hotels in the first place. But yeah, if they're not going to go into hotels, where are these people going to go? The government's got to process their applications sooner. If people have the right to stay here and that their asylum application is granted, they need to be properly integrated. And if they don't have to have the right, there needs to be a proper returns regime.
But the point is, Ed, that we've, you know, they're like little fires now. We've got these fires lighting up, and it makes great media and television coverage, and it gets a lot of coverage. People can see the protests. Almost these hotel protests, so almost worse than Rwanda. Rwanda was almost, that was a policy, it was dealt with in offices, but people can see this. And then there are people fanning the flames of that fire. So they've got to do something about it. Otherwise, this could literally bring them down. I mean, like you were saying yesterday on the show, if they don't solve this problem, they're probably on their way out as a government.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a bald fact for Jonathan's benefit if he wasn't watching my brilliant exposition yesterday.
It's available on ITV.
Regardless of the merits or demerits, and I heard everything that Jonathan said, both in terms of Britain being a place of compassion and taking people in who genuinely seek asylum, regardless of whether it's the Tories' fault back then, the fact is that the public have reached the end of the road as far as small boats are concerned, and they may, but well, they are a very small proportion of overall immigration, as it were. And the
That's a very important point, though, isn't it?
It is an important point, but the point I keep making, Adil, is that regardless of all of that, small boats have taken, and they did for Rishi Sunak, have taken on a place in the public's imagination, perhaps way beyond their genuine impact on the UK. People think it is outrageous and unfair. And unless the government can show it has really made a dent in the numbers of people crossing the Channel, they are going to get hammered for it every day. As you started this segment by saying, this is a nightmare for the government. So regardless, again, of whether it's a Tory council taking the government to court, regardless of whether or not the government has a strategy for dealing with court cases that are going to say, you've changed the use of this hotel, they have...
But have the government
this
government and previous caused a problem for themselves? Because the honesty is, as you said, for years, for decades, we've taken asylum seekers. I mean, my late mother worked in immigration. She used to tell me about it all the time. And people who would try and beat the system. I remember back then it was people in lorries, you know. So we've always done that. But also, it is a tiny minority of migration. It's not going to make hardly any difference to people's lives.
That does not matter as far as the public are concerned. And I agree with you, there's a lot of nonsense talk
but nobody in the political sphere is saying this and having this positive conversation.
The media does this as well. I mean, one of the things that drives me mad is when the media will write a story saying, you know, our prisons are full of foreign-born prisoners. Well, my mother's foreign-born, Boris Johnson's foreign-born. What does foreign-born mean? They may well be foreign-born. They may also well be British citizens who have come here and got a citizenship. So that's meaningless.
And I think that's right. And I think that's why, you know, when you're having this discussion, I think it's better to sort of step back and talk about it in a cool way, try and take some of the emotion out of it. I totally understand why people are angry about housing, often young men, in a hotel, which perhaps this was a hotel which, you know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, it's a hotel where you had your wedding reception or you had your, you know, a party for your kid. And now it's become what looks like a more sort of down-at-heel hotel, and there's lots of men in this hotel, and you don't know what they're doing, you don't know what's going on. I understand the anger of communities.
What happens, though, for where they are put
Well,
in
exactly.
that case?
That is the next question, isn't it? Because they have to go somewhere. Now, I suspect if you start putting a lot of these... it's majority men, it's not always men, but a lot of these men, young men in, you know, sort of bed-sit-style accommodation, then that's going to lead to lots of protests.
We've had that before, haven't we?
Yeah.
We put them in HMOs.
Exactly.
You have that, and there's always legal actions. You put them in old, you know, RAF barracks that some of them have tried to do, and they were considered
Bibi
inhumane.
Stockholm, the barge, there were issues with that on health grounds.
Point that, but it's almost like you can't just brush over this. I mean, the statistic is 4 to 5% of all migrants come on these boats. 4 to 5%. That's out of 100 people. That's 4. It's not going to make any difference to people's lives if you suddenly stop all this in the way that they think it is. So is the honesty that when you say, look, we do have to house them somewhere, we have an obligation, and do we need to start being more positive with our narratives, particularly the Labour government, Jonathan? I remember coming on this show when they were in opposition. Labour's line, Annie Cooper, was always about safe and legal routes. I mean, she stood with protesters, you know, on the sides of refugees. But the narrative, even from your government, Labour government, is no, we need to smash the gangs, stop the boats, all these unrealistic slogans.
Well, that's why I was making the point. There are parts of the world which are hugely unsafe and dangerous. And it's understandable that because whether it's war or the regime that's taken over in that country is a very sort of is a brutal regime, that people are fleeing those countries and are moving across the world to try and create better lives for their families. But also you've got to recognise that there is illegal migration going on as well. And where there is illegal migration, the government has got to get better at returning people to their countries of origin. They've just done a deal in the last few days with Iraq to try and for
it's tiny numbers,
returns, but yeah, but they've also done a deal with France as well. They are small numbers,
and the trouble
but
is,
they've got to show they are turning this around.
It comes back to public perception, doesn't it? And people don't feel that it's being turned around. They just feel that there are more and more migrants descending on the shores, and they're having to pay millions of pounds to put them up in hotels or, you know, give up housing that there's already a big long list for. And that's the issue, isn't it? Cracking how the public see it because of that anger that's there.
But remember, the reason why the hotels became a thing under the previous Conservative government, the reason they started putting all of these people in these hotels is because it was the policy decision of the previous Conservatives to not process their asylum applications. And that they argued rhetorically that everybody would be sent to Rwanda. It's only 1% of them would go to Rwanda.
Do you think that was a deliberate decision? It's lots of you say that now, that actually to slow down the process, in almost like we were saying, create that fire, create an issue. Is that a wild allegation?
I don't think the Tory government wanted to create an issue as in, you know, stoke up public anger or indeed...
But why would they slow it down? Why wouldn't you speed it up and be able to turn around and say, look, we've solved the problem?
I don't know the answer to that. There may well be...
Jonathan might be right.
There's all sorts of huge mess-ups in terms of what signals you could send to people to deter them from coming to Britain. So it may well be that they thought a long asylum process might say to people, well, we'll be stuck in limbo, unable to work if we get to Britain. It may well be that the courts and the judicial process slowed it up naturally anyway. There wasn't enough money in the system. There weren't enough lawyers. I seem to remember towards the end of the last Conservative government, they were actually speeding up the asylum process and putting money into the system because they recognised that the best way to, as it were, start to make progress on this issue was to process it as far as possible. But I think, you know, in terms of what Jonathan is saying, I think it's right. You've got to, not only do you have to take the heat and light out of it, but you've also got to not be too sentimental, if I can put it that way. I mean, there are gangs. I've talked on this programme before about the Vietnamese people who come here illegally. They are not seeking asylum. They're seeking an economic opportunity. Good luck to them on one level, but frankly, it's an illegal route into this country and it shouldn't be allowed. And I think we've also got to recognise that while Britain is a fantastic country, there's integrated lots of different communities, the level of immigration concerns the public. And in the 21st century, it is much easier to see where opportunities lie if you're in another country, and it's much easier to get to other countries. And it's not just the UK, it's the rest of Europe and so on.
But just on another point, what we now think is going to happen, well, you know, we've contacted a number of councils, ITV have contacted a number of councils, I'm saying up to 19 of them are going to take action. The Times are reporting they think 80 councils may take action.
Of course,
I mean, now everyone has a right to protest. And if people follow Nigel Farage's call, which is get out on the streets, and Generic is offering his services. He literally went on X, said, if anybody wants my help,
and he was the guy who opened these hotels.
To protest against the hotels that I opened, then do let me know.
To politics.
I mean, well, he'll argue he did later close them. But anyway, but the point is, we know that some of these protests, not all of them, and a majority peaceful people, and probably concerned about their towns and cities, but they were hijacked by the far right. I mean, that is a real concern. And what lesson does it send that actually you can go out there, you can cause violent disorder, and you can change policy in this country by that way?
There's an element of chicken and egg to this. So it is bad politics to kind of have a knee-jerk reaction to the far right. But you also have to recognise if your policy is not working, you leave a gap that the far right is only too keen to fill.
So you've almost got to embrace it, have you?
So, no, you've got to show the public that you're acting and you're making an impact on this issue. And, you know, to be fair to the government, it's addressing the issue in the sense it's not pretending it's not happening. But like the last government, it's finding its policies aren't necessarily having the impact. Although Dan Jarvis said yesterday 35,000 people have been returned this year. That sounds to me like a big and significant number. But as I've said again and again, you know, if you're Keir Starmer sitting in Downing Street, for me, this is your number one issue, and you throw everything you have.
But the issue is, isn't it, that it is already a system that's so massively under pressure, a system that's in crisis already, that over the next few weeks, potentially, this is set to get so much worse then if the government have to find immediate emergency accommodation for potentially thousands of asylum seekers who can't anymore live in these hotels.
I mean, my colleagues in the Labour government, I mean, this is now would be like an emergency for them. They'll be in meetings with their, you know, all of their civil servants and councils trying to work out what to do, because if the people are moved into sort of, you know, the bed-sit style accommodation, HMOs as we call it, that will lead to protests. You know, across the country now, as you say, every council is going to be under pressure to take more legal action. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand that this decision was on quite a narrow technical ground, so it's suggested not every local authority will manage to get this overturned in the courts. But who knows? Every council is going to try it because they're going to be under pressure by their residents to do that. But equally, right, we have to recognise that people have to go somewhere. And if that, the government may need to look at building sort of, I don't know, sort of temporary accommodation centres, but that's expensive as well, and there's been problems with those in the past. But part of this is speeding up their asylum applications. And if people have the right to stay, then they should be properly integrated in society. And if they don't have the right to stay, the government's got to look at a proper returns agreement with the countries that they've originally come from.
OK, well, listen, this is something we're going to be talking about further. We've got the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, coming on, and also for the government, Catherine McKinnell, here to talk about GCSE results, but we will be speaking to her about it as well. On the subject of GCSE results, obviously, there are lots of people up and down the country who will be nervously waiting theirs at this time of day to see what they've got. This was the pandemic year, they're calling it, weren't they? Because all the children that then moved from primary to secondary school in the pandemic are the ones that are getting their GCSE results today. So they had added pressures to be able to deal with that. We are thinking that girls will slightly outperform boys, as is the case. But on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today, Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, has been speaking about the state failing white working class people. And there's this stark statistic that she's warning of. 4/5 of children from white working class backgrounds falling short in English and maths skills required to get on in life. And, I mean, this is a shocking statistic, isn't it? And points to, you know, a real failure to get to grips with the inequalities in our education system.
Yeah, and I think that the government have really got to look at this. If you've now got something like 1 million young people between sort of 16 and in their early 20s who are not in education, they're not in employment, they're not in any training. And I think that one of the things that makes me really angry as a parent and as an ex-MP for a very poor inner city area is that I think both Tories and, to a certain extent, my own party are not doing enough to recognise that this generation of children were hugely impacted by the pandemic, who lost so much of their education, lost so much of their opportunities to play and socialise with their colleagues. We shouldn't be surprised that since the pandemic, we've had a huge increase in the numbers of children not returning to school. They've just disappeared. They're just absent, and no one really knows what they've been doing. We've seen this huge increase in mental health problems amongst young people. I really think we've got to do more to invest in our education system, to invest in this generation of young people, because they lost so much. They lost the best part of 2 years' worth of education.
Jonathan,
That's a big time chunk.
You don't get to a stat like this in a short period of time. And this is a long-term malaise in this country. Only 19% of white British working-class children achieve a strong pass in maths and English, GCSE. That is appalling. But I think the crucial part of that is working class. And we know this country, and we don't talk about it enough, has a class issue. And the Conservatives very rarely talk about it. So I'm not surprised Labour have brought this up, actually. But that is the fundamental issue. There is huge inequality. You look in the north of England, and I see it a lot. I mean, I live in London a lot, but originally from Birmingham, I go back home. Then you go to the West Midlands, you go to the north. It's a stark difference to the metropolitan bubble of London. And these are the issues that really need to be addressed. And we've never quite got it right. Every government talks about it leading up to election, but they never get it right.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm from a white working class background. I grew up in a small town in North Manchester, but I worked really hard. I got to university, but I came from a family where nobody in my family went to university. My dad was a casino croupier. My mum was a Playboy bunny girl, would you believe? So, that's a very...
You
didn't know that.
You can't just drop
made
that.
that up just to get the clicks on the YouTube video.
Honestly, the clicks and the abuse will be coming from the first discussion about...
I think some of your family might be abusing you after this.
Immigration, I can tell you that. But I think, when you look at the statistics, northern towns are always bottom of the league, like places like,
the North East. I think there was an incredible statistic for the North East comparatively to London, which is completely out of sync.
About their young people not going on to university.
Yeah.
So there is a huge inequality. We've got to tackle this.
So what's the answer then, Ed, with regards to
Well, the answer
because the trouble is
the answer is to start talking about
it's
it.
like a whole generation of children being failed, isn't it? And that's their future's blind.
Yeah, and I think Adam's right. It's not just about, obviously, COVID. This is an issue that has been going on for many, many years. And it's a kind of... And you're, again, absolutely right to say it's about class. I mean, I did a lot of work on diversity when I was a minister, and people would come to me and say, well, that's good and very important work, but also you've got to do something about the white working class as well, not getting the same opportunities. I mean, I was the culture minister, and people used to talk about it in the arts, that actually... white working class people don't get the opportunities that they used to get, 30 or 40 years ago. You think about the great stars of the 60s and 70s, they were white working class people. So we've got to think about how you get people access to the education and skills, and also the motivation.
And if you talk to people from a racial background, I've been in conversations about diversity, when you get to the bottom, you realise, actually, it's not necessarily about the colour of our skin, it's about our class.
Exactly right.
Because if you look at the people like, you look at Rishi Sunaks of this world, he might be of brown skin, but he's done very well for himself, right? He's managed to climb that ladder through the city and into politics. Different world for him for lots of other Asians. So class is actually probably more significant than race and culture in many ways.
And I think you're right, and it's weirdly difficult for the British to have this conversation about class because we're obsessed by class. So people are always being kind of asked, what class are you in coded words?
But we do have, though, and this is why this government should get on with this, arguably the most working class cabinet in history, because I think everybody in this cabinet is actually comprehensive school educated, which is, I think that's the first.
I don't know how
on majority.
Well, look, no wonder this government has no old Etonians in its cabinet. No wonder it's...
Well, look, talking about class, doesn't matter what class of train carriage you get into, what do you think of people playing loud music on their phones? Are you a fan of that? They haven't got their headphones?
No, it drives me doolally. I mean, I find it absolutely so irritating. But in a typically sort of British way.
Yeah, you
I just
do.
sit there quietly grumbling to myself.
Well, the good news is Irish Rail are set to impose a hefty fine on people playing music aboard their trains in what the operator describes as an effort to make journeys as enjoyable as possible for passengers. I mean, I can't believe people do this, actually, to be honest.
It's true. I find it absolutely fascinating. I think, what is going on inside that
Not
head
very much,
that
apart from the
says,
music.
I can play the music that I want to hear to the rest of the carriage.
Yeah, and actually,
And I
even
don't care
mums, and I have to say this to mums who might be listening, and dads, parents, they have their children on iPads sometimes, and with no headphones. And I've been on a train recently, and they're both playing games, and that sound of the games...
It's very
I
irritating.
had that on an aeroplane recently. It's enough to drive you nuts, isn't it?
Of course, you can't
But
say anything because somebody will be videoing it.
Yeah.
On
I know.
Yeah, exactly. Did you say anything to them, or did you just sort of sit there and grumbling?
I did actually.
Did say
Wow.
something,
I did
I
actually.
know.
I did politely say, I said, look, I'm reading something, and, would you mind?
And then what happened?
And she moved to a different carriage.
I tell you,
Because
this
I
is the
felt
best.
guilty.
This is the best GMB I've ever been on. Labour minister's Playboy mum,
Yeah.
TV star in train bust up. It just gets better and better.
It's all happening
articles
this
in the
morning.
tabloids, aren't you? That's you who writes that little
It's
clickbait
all go.
material.
It's brilliant. I've got
Putting
to go and
feet
I've
on
got to go and have
seats
the
as well.
row with somebody on the tube now to kind of make it
I
a
know.
full set.
I'm not really sure we can top that. We have got a weather-related story, though. Laura, like this one. 1 in 3 Brits venture out for a picnic, no matter what the weather, even if they have to eat in their car
It's so true,
or
isn't it?
shelter under a
People
brolly.
go on the beach when it's pouring with rain because it's their seaside holiday.
Determined to see it through.
Yeah.
Is this something either of you have ever done?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I don't think I have, but I can imagine.
Not when you're in the Playboy Mansion.
I've never been to Playboy Mansion.
Look at his eyes
completely gone there. He's thinking,
He went there.
Have I said too much?
It's not even 7 a.m. What will people be thinking as they're eating their breakfast? But no, but you can imagine this. You can imagine the scene that I've been spent all morning making these sandwiches. We're going out and having a picnic, whether you like it or
Come
not.
hell or high
100%.
water.
That's
Called British resilience, Ed.
It's just drizzle, frankly. It's a shower, it's just
Yeah.
drizzle, it's fine.
It'll go in a minute, it'll pass.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you. We'll see you later.
Thank you so much.